Good evening. Again, welcome to Organic News here on awakeradio.co.uk, which also gets broadcasted worldwide off of shazizradio.com. And we are in the process right now of getting Gerald Celente he is the publisher of the Trends Research. It's trendsresearch.com. He only has 20 minutes, so we do not want to waste any time. So the topic on the table that I actually saw Gerald posted on his Twitter, because he has a history of martial arts, which I feel like might just be coming in pretty handy. Oh, hi, it's Catherine Waters. How are you?
Hello, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad, at least you have 20 minutes to spare for to share, your views. I saw on your Twitter that you had posted, right, because one of the questions that I had sent to Zeke, I saw that you have a history of martial arts, and I've always been big into fitness. Which, I was kind of just in the process of making a joke as you were coming on that martial arts might be coming in pretty handy pretty soon with what's going on these days. And so, right, that was the topic. Well, one of the topics and things that I wanted to ask you was do you feel that kind of history and being into martial arts, and how has that contributed to you being a good trends researcher?
Well, I began the martial arts actually the early 80s. I began with Tai Chi, and then I went to Okinawan Tay for several years. And then in the early 90s, I was introduced to John Perkins.
Oh.
And his, not that John Perkins about who writes the books, but John Perkins, who's his attackproof.com is his website.
Awesome.
And him I learned close combat, which is very different than the martial arts. The martial arts are forms. And in answering your question about how has it helped me in trend forecasting, there is no form. You never know what's going to come at you, in what direction, how it's going to look, or what it's going to feel like. And with close combat, that's what it prepares you for. It prepares you for the unexpected, to expect the unexpected, which is very different than katas, which are very prevalent in the martial arts. There are no forms. So that's one of the things. And really, I make this very clear, that I could not be the person who I am, or the trend forecaster that I am, had it not been for John Perkins at attackproof.com. And by the way, I had my own school for several years as well. I used to teach close combat. And I say that because I say what I say, I believe in what I believe, I don't tell anybody what to do, I'm respectful of everyone, but if somebody pushes me, I'll punch them.
Right.
I don't push them back. So what the close combat gave me, and as you well know, I've been on virtually every TV and radio show in the country, and many of them around the world, whether it's Oprah, CNN, the Today Show, Good Morning America, O'Reilly, you name it, I've been there. So somebody has a bad attitude, and they think they're going to bully me, they got the wrong guy.
Exactly.
And that's what the close combat comes into. I mean, if we want to talk about this outside, we could talk about it outside. Don't tell me I have to believe in your crap. Just to make it really clear is the attitude that I have. I don't push my belief on anybody. My motto, taught to be by my dear father, may his soul rest in peace, was think for yourself. Exactly. So I'm not telling anybody how to think. This is the way I see it. Here's the way I see the trend because of this factor, that factor, or this factor. If you don't like it, fine. That's okay. But don't tell me I have to believe in your fairy tale, because then I get tight about it. So that's where the close combat comes in, and it comes in that, and as I said, to expect the unexpected. You never know what it's going to look like or where it's coming at. So let's take the present.
Right.
And we're talking now as the country, the government is in shutdown.
Right.
I look at these guys, they're little boys. If any one of them came to me, Cruz, Reed, Pelosi, this one, that one, guy, girl, woman, I don't care. Don't talk to me in those tones of voice. It doesn't set well with me. Who do you think you're talking to, Johnny Boy Kerry, when you're telling me I got to buy you BS about Syria? So if you want to come over and talk to me, man to man, we can do that. But don't throw your jive on me because you were born on third base and thought you hit a triple. So that's where the close combat comes in. These guys are little boys and girls in sandboxes throwing sand at each other. That's what we're watching in front of our eyes today. And if you don't have the dignity, the courage, or the self-respect to stand up against these little boys and girls, in my way of thinking of it, as a close combat practitioner, you should be ashamed of yourself for bowing down, sucking up, and believing in these little boys and girls. So that's where the close combat brings me at a different level on how I look at things and do things. And I always bring it to the fight. If it has to go to the fight, somebody's going to die over you, and it's not going to be me.
So, I mean, that sort of brings me to, exactly what you're talking about with today and the government and the shutdown and these corporations. I mean, like, the people really need to kind of start standing up to these bullies, because that's all they are. Like, underneath, the facade that they put on, like hiding behind like their big positions and all of that, they really are like little spoiled, brats and children underneath. And I tend to think that, the little guy is more qualified to be in a lot of these positions than the people who are actually in these positions, because at least, most little guys grew up somewhat tougher, and actually went through these processes, street fights, whatever, came from maybe like a little bit of rough neighborhoods and actually, earned their way. But I mean, a lot of these, right, they get this stuff. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them have it handed to them. Like, they didn't even really earn a lot of this stuff. And so your average little guy probably could kind of, kick the crap out of like John Kerry or something like that, I mean,
well, again, these are the same people that you hated in high school and college that wanted to be class president or head of the student council. The brown noses, the suck-ups, the gland-handers, the overly ambitious, and the insincere. And then, in taking it to another level, who made up this BS that we need gangs to run the government? Because that's all they are, they're gangs. You have the Bloods and the Crips, they're gangs. You had the Bananos and the Gambinos, they were gangs. You had the Meyer Lanskys and the Dutch Schultzes, they were gangs. And now you have the Republicans and the Democrats, they're gangs. Who made this up that you have to belong to this cheap clubhouse over here to run the government? Why can't Jane Doe or John Doe, affiliated with no one, not compromised by their political, I'm a political atheist, so I don't believe in political religions, but why can't we vote for people from the non-affiliated parties? So, yes, and talking about bullies, there's a story today in the New York Times about these campaigns to stop bullying. Oh. I was thinking about it today. A campaign to stop bullying. I was the smallest kid in the school. Kids used to try to, pick on me all the time. I'd rip anybody's jaw off if they tried to.
Good for you.
I was taught, you better protect yourself. One time, I'll tell you a quick story. I was about 18 years old, and I shot my mouth off at the wrong guy, and he ended up in a hospital.
Wow.
This is going way back, and this is, in the 60s. And, I woke up, I was semi-conscious, and the policeman standing next to me, and he said, "What's your parents' telephone number?" I gave it to him. The guy's talking to my father, and he said, "Your father wants to talk to you." I said to my father, gets on the phone. He said, "What happened?" I start telling him what happened. And my father said to me, "You got yourself into this. You get yourself out. I'm busy. I have things to do." I was a wise guy. I got my brains bashed out because I deserved it.
Right.
And I learned from that, and that was the last time I got beaten up. So now I'm watching all of these things, going on, the bullies. How about standing up and fighting for yourself? Oh, no, what are you going to have, Harry Reid protect you? You're going to have Nancy Pelosi or Feinstein? Oh, what are you going to have, Teddy Cruz? Oh, what are you going to have, Obama? Who's going to protect you? Oh, some psychopath that just got out from Iraq that was torturing people in Abu Ghraib, that they made a policeman. Oh, he's going to protect you? You better protect yourself. You better stand up for yourself. And this country is not going to change until people find their own courage, their own dignity, and their own self-respect.
Right, and your dad did not come and bail you out of that situation.
Oh, no.
So why should, right, why, I mean, we only have 7 more minutes left, so I want to utilize the time as wisely as I possibly can. What really kind of drew me to you the first time, I think it was on Alex Jones or something, and you were calling Wall Street and these power hungry people, and you were just telling it like it was and calling them junkies and addicts. And I started dancing around my apartment. I was just like, yeah, because I've never, I was always a fitness person. That's why I kind of wanted to get a little bit of your martial arts background. I was more of just I did a lot of, I came from a broken home. So I reached out to weight training and run, jogging, and fitness really it helped me a lot and saved my life a lot. I attribute it to. And so, but I was always into, health on all levels, like fitness, but also, psychological, right. Like martial arts is also a lot of spiritual, things like that, and meditation and stuff. And so, when you started talking about addicts, we're getting underneath the economy. You have to go underneath to the level of health that these people, they truly, are junkies, like you said, and they need an intervention. And people really do. We have to strip away this, this system. It needs to be stripped away, and we have to get to the bare, what's underneath it all. And, people need to find their instincts, just like you were just saying, and stand up to the bully and, start taking some kind of martial arts or self-defense classes, which I'm even kind of feeling like I do a lot of yoga, meditating and things like that. But I always wanted to do a martial arts, and I never did. And I really feel like that's exactly, the people need some leverage. You got to start getting some leverage.
Well, again, this is not it, and I agree with you. By the way, it's all of it. It's physical, emotional, and spiritual. I begin my day with meditation. I meditate for a minimum of a half hour every day before I start my day, and I work out in my own way every day. And I try to eat healthy every day. I would explain my diet as the olive oil, garlic, and tomato diet. By the way, I also have an honorary doctorate in complementary medicine from the National University of Health Sciences for the work I've done over the years. The first book I worked on back in the early '80s was Natural Healing. So I have a deep understanding of this, and by the way, also coined the term clean food, back in the early '90s. New York Times had a big story about it. So it was, I've been on this curve, but again, it's not when it's more than the martial art. The martial art, when you take it to the concept of what it is, it's forms. There are no forms. There are no forms of life. You know that expression, think outside the box?
Right. You got to be ready for everything.
No, no, that's the point.
Oh,
There is no box.
right.
Even if you think you use the term think outside the box, you've already put yourself in a box. There is no box. There's nothing. It's all open space. And that's what that, and the other thing that John Perkins from attackproof.com taught me, I was just telling some people today about ego. And they went to see something on Broadway about Lady Day, Billie Holiday. And they were so disappointed in it because the performer, she didn't sound anything like Billie Holiday. I mean, Billie Holiday's great. And she was doing her own trip on it and doing her own interpretation. Well, if you're going to do an interpretation of somebody, do the interpretation of them. Don't call it or else call it my version of Billie Holiday. And I said to him, it's about the ego. And what Perkins taught me, and he teaches, is that the only time your ego comes into play is when your life depends upon it. Otherwise, get over the trip. And most people can't. Their ego gets in the way all the time. And you see it in music. You see it in a lot of things. You see it with the people discussing political issues or economic issues. Their ego gets in the way. So at close combat, it's very different. There is no ego. Your ego is only there to defend yourself in a matter of life and death.
I take meditation to mean, and I try to practice living my life and being present in the moment as much as possible, and not being in your head. Like, I feel like people need to, be in your body, be in your instincts more, and not in the program in your head. Because what I learned, the body is always living in the present moment. The mind can go anywhere. It can make anything up that it wants, which is like, I feel like the world, the Wall Street world that we're living in, is these people are just in their heads, like completely disconnected from reality, making up whatever they want.
Well, again, everybody has that movie going on in their head about their lives. And as I look at meditation, and the way I've learned it, is to stop the movie. And that's what I do. I try to stop the movie. I just want to try to get as much quiet space as possible. Because when you stop the movie, then that leaves room for other things to enter in. And so that's how I look at it. And that's in my meditation, I just want, I read all day, I study all day. I just don't want to keep living this stuff, so I try to quiet my mind down. But again, to me, it all can change. Look, there are a lot of positive things going on. A new poll just came out. Only 10% of the people believe in the efficacy of Congress. That's great. That's at an all-time low. Only 87% of the people believe in Congress. Right. That's great. You had between 70 and 80% of the people were against going to war against Syria. That's great. So let's build on the greatness. We can have a renaissance. We can change things. We could go into a new direction. And that's what, why I'm up here in colonial Kingston and restoring the most historic corners in the United States. Some of the buildings, some of them have been restored. Which is the only place in the U.S. where on each corner there's a pre-Revolutionary War stone building. So I'm doing what I can to start the revolution. And the revolution really is about everything that we talked about, spiritual, emotional, and physical. It's a time for people to rise up against the little girls and boys in the sandbox that are throwing sand at each other and destroying the country with rape, pillage, and plunder. They take you to war, they rob your money, they take your house, they enslave you as an indentured servant by going to college and putting you into debt that you'll never get out of, and they also, and on and on and on. So that to me is when the people rise up within themselves, then society will change.
Maybe the government is shutting down so they could go and meditate. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, that would be something. But I think it's more verbal masturbation than meditation.
Exactly. So, I mean, what do you think this government shutdown is?
Oh, it'll mean nothing. It'll go on. Life will go on. Nothing will happen.
Right.
Nothing will happen. Nah, I've seen this play before. More fear and hysteria. You know?
Right. They're exaggerating their own importance.
Yeah. It's fear and hysteria. That's what they sell. Watch out for those terrorists. You can't go to Central Park and go to a concert without getting felt up, patted down, and they're gonna blow you up as you're listening to Stevie Wonder. Come on, it's all a game. Again, the sociopaths are in charge. Don't forget to vote. It's coming up time to vote for your favorite sociopath from the political mafia called the Republicans and the Democrats. And if you vote, you get what you deserve. So I have to say goodbye now. I have another interview coming in.
Thank
you. It was very nice talking with you, and all the best to you.
Yeah, come back on the show again, Gerald. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Okay, bye. So there he goes. He gave us a little bit, 2 extra minutes instead of just 20. We got 22 minutes. And so we will go to a break. After the break, I was planning on playing the other co-author of the book, Dollarocracy. This is going back Monday before last at the Judson Memorial Church here in New York City that has a lot of good events. So this is John Nichols. We had Robert McChesney, who was the other co-author. He was on last week. And so John Nichols, who was the other co-author of that book, I have about a half an hour of his talk from the Judson Memorial that I would like to let play after the upcoming break. So we are live after the break. Thank you again to Gerald Celente from the Trends Research. He's the publisher of the Trends Journal, trendsjournal.com, up there in Kingston, New York. Hope to have him on again. That would be, he's pretty concise. It's not rocket science. That's sort of, when you really realize how simple and basic and, kindergarten, what's that book? Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. So next I wanted to play John Nichols, who is also co-authored the book Dollarocracy. I thought he gave a pretty inspiring talk at the Judson Memorial about 2 weeks ago. And so here is John Nichols. Okay, so I just wanted to pause that video just for something actually. First of all, I don't think the sound quality is coming over as, I hope you guys can hear it okay, but something actually came up. So we are going to give TJ Fralls, he's actually been on the show before. He's going to be live down in Times Square, kind of covering the whole government shutdown. I'm just going to give Paula his number. And he's going to cover, he's doing something down there at Times Square for the government shutdown. He's representing Universal Truth Machine. I think he's like doing his own sort of informing the masses of, like what this whole government shutdown is about and how it's not quite the devastation I think that many people think that it is. So I'm just going to give Paula a minute, okay, yeah, to get TJ Fralls.
Hello?
Tim? TJ Fralls? Hi, from Universal Truth Machine.
Hey, Kat, how's it going?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
So why are you at Times Square on this day of the supposed government shutdown? And what are you doing down there?
We're here for the shutdown vigil, a good start. The idea here is that the government shutdown is nothing more than a political spectacle and show. And in fact, we should be shutting down so-called essential services, such as the Department of Homeland Security and the National Security Administration.
Right. Well, I mean, the whole point is that they end up shutting down things that don't need to be shut down and not shutting the things down that we need to shut down.
Well, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. You know, my favorite part is how they shut down wilderness zones. You know, that to me is the funniest thing. As if the wilderness cares whether or not there is a government, like whether the government bureaucrats have declared wilderness open or closed. Wilderness is always open.
Well, I mean that's sort of that's kind of like an ironic metaphor, because I'm always kind of writing in my blogs about how, the government, the powers that be, are not above the laws of nature. And to think that they have the power to close national parks or the wilderness.
It's a total and complete farce. As if you can't still go into the wilderness when if the quote unquote government is shut down. That to me is absurdity, and it just shows how ridiculous the whole spectacle is. But in reality, we should be shutting down significant portions of the government, beginning, in my estimation, with agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security and the abusive programs inside the national security, the NSA, all of the various agencies that are devoted to farces such as the war on drugs, like the DEA, and so on. These are things that should, in fact, actually be shut down. And it could save us a ton of money, and we will be better off for it.
Well, I was reading, I think it was on a RT TV page, that those are the things that they don't shut down. They're the ones deciding what is important and needs to be shut down. Again, not the people don't get to decide it. And so the TSA, they deem as, this necessary entity that they need to keep, in effect.
Yeah, well, and Congress believes themselves to be, they're still getting paid today as well. All of the lawmakers who have quote unquote shut down the government, they're still getting their paychecks, right? They are part of the so-called essential services, or whatever they're calling them.
Right. I mean, last night, right, we had that email feed going, which, was a lot of people were contributing. I'm just going to read a little piece. Of course, I'm going to not say who wrote it, but, because someone that was in the email feed was concerned about their mom, not getting her Social Security checks and Medicare. But I think I actually read someplace also that was going to continue. Medicare and Social Security checks were going to continue.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are probably considered under the header of. I guess those probably do not fall under the so-called non-essential services. Along with the Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA Security Theater, the DEA's farcical war on drugs, and so on.
Right. And so, I just had Gerald Celente on, and he pretty much said exactly the same thing, that it's a show.
Yeah.
This whole thing, he's lived through, probably more government shutdowns than you have, or even than I have. I mean, I've actually, I looked through the history of government shutdowns in the past, and to tell you the truth, I mean, I didn't notice anything like when the government was shutting down. It didn't seem to like, put a blimp on my radar screen one way or another. So, like,
yeah, a lot of people just don't care. A lot of people probably a lot of people don't even know that it's happening. And then, the more absurd part is the whole like hysterical, corporate media, and they're playing their stupid games about, who's to blame for this? Oh, the parties are pointing fingers, blah blah blah, thing, right? And they want to say, oh, the Democrats are like the Republicans. The Republicans are like, oh, it's all the Democrats' fault. The real problem is the party system itself. The two-party system is the problem. They are not part of the solution. They are part of the problem. Right?
Exactly.
To me, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go finish.
No, you go ahead.
Well, right. Are they ever going to look at themselves? Are they ever going to look at themselves and say that, own some of the responsibility and say, oh yes, I've done this wrong. I've made that mistake. I mean, are they ever going to do that? I mean, we all know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone that will never take responsibility for their part in things. I mean, that is not, everyone has experiences like that in one, form or another with someone in their lives. And of course, the higher up the totem pole you get, the less likely you are to have people acknowledge that they did anything wrong. When you're in the, have positions of power, I mean, you're never going to admit that you make any kind of mistakes. So, it's kind of hysterical, really, to have, the people with the chocolate all over their faces denying that they ate the cake,
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, we could also point out that it's time that voters in the United States start taking responsibility for the fact that they continue. Who are these people who continue to vote for Republicans and Democrats? What are those people? This is like a lunatic minority in this country who still continue to vote for these vultures and vampires in the Democratic and Republican parties. It's time for those people to stand up and take responsibility for their actions and, like you said, get out of that abusive relationship with the parties. They're talking about, oh, this is like they're likening one another to hostage taking and suicide bombing, but really it's voters who are in this absurd relationship with the parties that they just keep going back for more. It's like they can't get enough.
Right. So that's exactly like, what we have to start, zeroing everything down to is just looking at it. You're in an abusive relationship. The bottom line is I know it's really noisy there. The people are kind of a captive audience. These scenarios go on in homes, right? Like abusive, domestic violence situations. Anytime someone feels like they have somebody in a captive situation and have complete and utter power over that person, whether it be children or spouses or whatever, or employees or, the people of a country, of course they're going to completely take advantage. There's no reason for them not to when they can completely do it and get away with it. So that's why the only way, we have to, I believe that we have to help the weak and the ones that get easily preyed upon, the poor. But the thing that's really sad though is the people need to see that they're being abused and they have to want the help, because too many times, the victims are protecting and standing up for the abusers.
Well, that's exactly how the two-party system works, right? It's right? It's instead of actually confronting the real systemic and structural problems with the political process, which is actually undermining constitutional government in this country, and arguably leading to, basically just from one constitutional crisis to the next. The parties play, basically they have their own version of good cop, bad cop. The so-called liberals and left wing, they say, oh, what are you going to do? Vote for the Republicans? And the conservatives and the right wing, and what are they going to do? Vote for the Democrats? But this is exactly the point. No one should be voting for either of these parties anymore. Anyone who votes, in my estimation, anyone who continues to support either of the major parties is the problem. Those people are the problem. They're a minority. They're not even a majority. They like to pretend that they're a majority. If you add all the Republicans and Democrats together, you still barely even have a majority of people in this country. That's how many people are so sick and tired of all this bullshit, frankly, that emanates from the cesspool of the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee.
I went back to the alternative banking group that I used to go to on Sunday because I really like the Occupy Finance book that they put out. And, I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but, I was just kind of thinking of ways that the people can just unplug. And so I'm throwing out ideas to the group, like for the people should just stop paying their taxes.
The tax resistance league, has been around for a couple decades, I believe.
And of course,
that's one significant form of resistance.
I mean,
although a lot of people are probably unwilling to take that risk because the IRS will come after you with SWAT teams and tanks, and assault rifles.
So, my whole point is that there's no way around doing what needs to be done. Like Gerald Celente, I mean, the topic that I kind of gave him that I wanted to talk with him about, that he has a history of martial arts, and how did that help him, be like a good financial trends forecaster. And, ultimately everything comes down to just being, and we have to stand up to the bullies. So whatever works, of course it's freaking scary. Of course it's like, that's the whole point though. Like that's what standing up, requires is for the people to, feel the fear and kind of go, you have to start moving in that direction at least. Sure, it's going to be scary. There's no way around that. But the more power and the bigger these people get and the more leverage they take from us every freaking second of the day, they're getting more and more leverage away from us. I mean, it's just going to get harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, well, and in large part, the entire political system feeds off of fear. That's how they sold the Department of Homeland Security. That's how they sold the Patriot Act to the people. Right? This is how they sell the TSA people in this country. It's like the professional hysterics in the mainstream media. Carrying water for the bullshit artists and the scammers in the ruling party. It's out of control. That's why they need to be shut down.
Oh, but what I was gonna say was, oh gosh, I just it flew. Oh, crap, I lost my train. Say what you just said again, because
what? Sorry, say again.
I'm sorry.
It's getting loud here.
The last part of what you just said,
it's time to shut them down. It's time to shut them down, right? Like the entire system is based on fear, right? And feeding fear, and that's how they sold us. That's how they sell us. That's how they continue to erode the Constitution. That's how they continue to erode basic rights and civil liberties in this country. By slowly chiseling away with their ideology, with their fear-based ideologies and their hysterics.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got my train of thought back.
Okay.
So people so the people are afraid anyway, but their fear is going in the wrong direction. Like we're being taught to be afraid of the boogeyman in some other country, when if that fear was actually applied to the people that we really need to be afraid of, which is right here at home, like, I mean, fear, okay, like, it comes in handy, but as long as it's being diverted to the completely wrong direction, I mean, then the people really don't stand a chance if they're fighting the wrong enemy or being afraid of the wrong, entity.
I mean, I don't even think there's anything to be I don't think we should even be talking about we should be saying we should be afraid of the Democratic and Republican parties, because they are, they are weak. There's barely 50% of the people in this country identify as either Democrat or Republican. They're lucky if a third of people, 1 out of 3 people identify with either of them. People basically refuse to vote in this country. Probably the majority of elections is probably voter turnout hovers below 30%. That is not any kind of support for the Democratic and Republican parties in this country, but they have rigged the system to keep themselves in power. So I don't really think there's anything to actually be afraid of, except for I think people might just be afraid of the fact that maybe there's nothing to be afraid of. I think that for a lot of people, that's what I think the Democrats and Republicans themselves are often afraid of. The fact that they are not what they puff themselves up to be,
right,
so to speak.
So then, okay, like what would you say to your average person who is afraid that if they don't pay their taxes, the IRS is going to come and arrest them or put them in jail or something?
I mean, I think that's actually a reasonable fear. They should probably, you probably should be afraid that the IRS is going to ruin your life and perhaps come after you with a SWAT team and murder your pets. I think that's actually fairly rational fear, or reasonable at least, given the militarization of police in this country. But the people who craft the policies that allow those things to happen, such as the Democrats and Republicans, the lawmakers, the people who are writing the regulations and the statutes, those are the people who are not to be feared. They are, I think they're fundamentally weak, and I think that they could be, their whole house of cards can be easily collapsed. All that's going to be required is for people to stop supporting them. It's literally that simple, and a majority of people, I think, already have.
So that's a really excellent point. I would really kind of like to just maybe not just kind of skim over it so quickly, because again, that is a point that I try to stress over and over again, is that it really is not the 1% who are the ones that you need to be afraid of. It's the people. I mean, Hitler was not the one to put all the Jews in the concentration camps. The people did it. There
were certainly a lot of Nazis doing it. That is indeed true.
And so so the military, the cops who continue to protect these weaklings, those are the ones that we really need to reach.
Well, I mean, it's whether just from a policy perspective, we can. I mean, the militarization of police can be stopped with policy. I mean, they're literally just following orders. I would wager that there's a lot of them out there who get all gung ho about going and busting down doors and maybe shooting up a house. But they're still just following orders, right? That was the old way from Nuremberg. But
exactly.
If the policy was changed, it wouldn't happen.
But the whole point,
if it did, they would be prosecuted.
the whole point too of what even Gerald Celente was saying, and just about people getting and finding their instincts and standing up to the bullies, like this, the whole that's the whole point, is to not just follow orders, is to stand up to these bullies, and
Yeah.
instead of following their orders, how about, like, maybe throwing them a little bit of a beating there.
Yeah, how about, like, declaring your independence from your dependency on them. I think that's the first step.
I mean, and this whole, and people really seeing money and the monetary system for what it is, and how it's just money, in my opinion, is being weaponized against the people. Money is just a weapon against the people. And people need to start seeing that for what it is. I mean, if it's being used to get people to, like, take away the rights of others, like, oh, if you want to have a job, I mean, look, I don't know how bad the workforce is out there, because I don't really have a traditional job, but if I were to go out and look for a job, I mean, what are the chances that I would feel like I have to kind of do something or go against, what I believe in order to get a paycheck? I mean, how many people feel that way when they go to work every day? I mean, if the monetary system costs that much to keep going, isn't it kind of obvious that we need to let go of it? That it costs more than it's worth?
Yeah, I don't disagree. But I'm going to get back to my vigil now.
Okay.
Here, the shutdown vigil. It's a good start. Now we need to start shutting down DHS and NSA and DEA and all the whole alphabet soup of agencies that are turning this country into a lawless cesspool.
Exactly. Okay, TJ Frolls of, what was the
Universal Truth Machine.
Universal Truth Machine. Okay, thank you, TJ.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, before we go to the next guest, which is Nicholas Levis, who goes to the alternative banking group of Occupy Wall Street, and the really wonderfully put together Occupy Finance book that was given to me at the second anniversary of Occupy, and the very well informed people who worked in finance their whole lives, that are a part of that group and have been diligently working for, I think it's 2 years. There's also a Frontline PBS special that a couple of members of the group have been on. Maybe I could try to find that information and say it so that people can look it up on the PBS webpage. And I just wanted to quickly, I have this communication and recovery, this little booklet that I have laying around, because it's from a Codependence Anonymous meetings I used to attend in the 90s for quite a long time. I've been it was always so obvious to me, we need to focus on communication. Communication skills are very important. And I found this little booklet, and I mean, just right here it says, what is healthy communication? Boundary setting. I mean, when we go to work every day and we feel like we don't have a right to express and just be respected at our jobs. Healthy communication is clear, concise, and honest. To improve our communication, we first need to know our hearts and minds clearly. Codependents continually need to ask, what do I think, feel, and need? I'm reading this because I feel that we've become codependent in our country. Money, the monetary system, what we need to do to have a paycheck is costing more and more of ourselves, of our self, our self-dignity, our self-worth. it goes on to say, once we answer these crucial questions, we can empower ourselves to express our feelings openly and honestly without being controlled by our fear of the reactions of others. I mean, it's important to practice, techniques like this, setting boundaries, which, I mean, who teaches people that? I mean, some people have the fortune, the good fortune of, growing up perhaps like Gerald Celente, whose father was, teaching him to stand up and protect himself. I mean, not a lot of people have that. They don't, I mean, many do. But then again, when a lot of people go to work, some of that stuff kind of tends to go out the window, and we're taught that, you need that paycheck, you need that money, and so everything else gets put on the back burner, and that is the wrong direction to be going in. So I'll just read the next paragraph that reads, what causes codependent communication? Codependent communication is caused by one primary force, fear, and the need to control it. Fear is the great repressor of the human spirit and the hidden culprit behind many of our damaging beliefs about others and ourselves. Fear masquerades as truth and holds us in a false belief that we are unworthy and others' reactions will destroy us. I mean, that is so powerful, and it's so basic. I mean, it goes on, it reads into other things, but I'm just going to skip and then read. The following suggestions may help us develop healthier communication patterns. Listen carefully to our own thoughts and feeling. Point number 2, sometimes delay our immediate responses to questions or comments to give ourselves time to think and feel. That's really important and the reason why I always talk about meditation and paying attention to your breath, because that, just doing that simple thing is like pumping the brake pedal in your car that can actually help to stay in the present moment and not be overwhelmed by our own fears, our own emotions, and getting triggered. The third point reads, monitor ourselves for weasel words as we speak. The next point, prepare for difficult conversations ahead of time, yet be open for spontaneity. Good one. Next point, use Codependence Anonymous or personal affirmations when we're feeling the codependent crazies. That's open to, that's not so clear. The next point, note self-effacing language such as I just, I guess, I think, and I only, which I'm definitely guilty of. Next point, know that if we change our minds about previous decisions, we can verbalize our current thoughts if we need to. Next, practice using different response words and expressions. For example, are we always fine? Watch for bargaining patterns. For example, I can't today, but I'll try tomorrow, when we know that tomorrow won't be any better either. Speak slowly, firmly, and clearly when drawing boundaries. Avoid justifying or explaining ourselves, even when we feel a compulsion to do so. Notice how words such as should and ought may be controlling us. Note whether we try to control others with our words, tone, volume, or nonstop talk, or if we allow others to control us with similar verbal tactics. Speak lovingly with others, our higher power, and ourselves. And lastly, add our own personal patterns to the list. When we are able to say no without feeling guilty, we have taken a major step forward in our recovery. I mean, seriously, I mean, it's to the point. People need, we need a 12-step, people need a 12-step program. They need recovery. We need to be in recovery from the system, from giving our power over to bullies and being afraid to stand up for what's right, what we need to do for ourselves. And we need to come together to support those who are the most vulnerable and easily preyed upon by the system. When we inventory our own weasel words and stop ourselves in mid-sentence from using them, we have taken a major step forward in recovery. When we catch ourselves before we habitually apologize for something, we have taken a major step forward in our recovery. When the day comes when we can say, no, I am clear about my feelings and I won't be going, and we don't feel a pressing need to justify ourselves, we have taken a major step forward in our recovery. When we speak clearly and honestly, and we set a boundary and don't allow another's anger to control us, we have taken a major step forward in our recovery. So again, I'm going to read the last sentence. When we speak clearly and honestly, as we set a boundary and don't allow another's anger to control us, we have taken a major step forward in our recovery. So that includes people at our jobs, the government, police, the military. It doesn't just stop with those around us or in our family. And of course, these things are not going to happen overnight. So we will take a quick break and come back with the next guest, Nicholas Levis from the alternative banking group of Occupy Wall Street. Okay, we are back. We have Nicholas Levis from the alternative banking group of Occupy Wall Street on the line with us on Skype. So welcome to awakeradio.co.uk, which also gets broadcast over shazizradio.com. So Nicholas, let me ask you, when did you start going to the alternative banking group and why?
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
First of all, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Alternative banking, I started going last summer of 2012. But alternative banking is one of the original Occupy Wall Street working groups that started back during the occupation of Zuccotti Park and has been meeting weekly, every week, even Christmas and New Year's, ever since. And it's really kept up the pure wine of Occupy, let's say. And originally, it was a much larger group that has split into three different ones by function. Alternative banking, despite the name, is more the criticism of banking as it exists. Then there's Occupy the SEC, which has been writing complaints to the SEC and commentaries on regulations, sometimes 300 pages, astonishing work, and they've gotten a lot of press for it as well. And then there is the Occupy Banking Group, as it's called, who were originally going to start a non-exploitative bank, but have, as a first stage, launched a prepaid debit card called the Occupy Card, the Occupy Debit Card, which is in the New York Times today, I believe, or was in the New York Times yesterday. So all three of these groups have gotten a lot of press. And if you'd like, I can tell you what alternative banking has been doing the last 2 years.
So there's actually an Occupy debit card?
That is correct. I am not the person to really speak to about this. That would be Karn Ross, who is a UK diplomat, or former UK diplomat, I should say, who spoke out against the Iraq War. And I can send you a link at the end of this of him speaking and explaining the concept. The idea is a debit card that directly helps Occupy causes on the one hand with the proceeds, that isn't making a profit, that is a cooperative, and that is not having all these exploitative charges. But again, if you want a future guest, Karn Ross would be a great one, I think.
Yeah, definitely send me the link. Please do that. Okay,
All right.
so
And I hope you can get it out to your viewers, to your
yeah.
listeners.
Uh, I mean, like with that, I will just say that on Facebook, if people want to find me, I'm just Cat CAT Waters WATTERS, and my YouTube channel is April, the month that I was born, and Waters WATTERS. Uh, and so
Fantastic. Can we be friends?
yeah, yeah, please. I have
All
so
right.
many.
All right.
I
I
have
can't wait to friend you right after this.
I have so many videos from the beginning of Occupy, all the protests. I mean, I have a lot of really good interviews, and I mean, I'm not as good yet as Luke Radowski of We Are Change, but I'm getting there. Anyway, I've been reading the Occupy Finance book ever since I got it, and I really love it. Actually, I scribbled in it. That's what when I'm really into a book, that's what I do. I write, I underline, I make tons and tons of notes, and I'm almost like right now. I mean I want to read from it, but it's the whole thing is like really good. I'm trying to actually decide what we can focus on, and I think chapter 5 is a good place to go. If I don't, if would you agree that the Dirty Dozen legal outrages? Maybe we could read from there, or at least a couple of these total outrageous, rigged things that enable the too big to fails to continue to continue to get bigger and fail more miserably.
I think that's a great idea. I was also thinking maybe we could start with a little bit from the introduction, but maybe if it's all right, we could just back up a little and explain the origins of this book and a little bit more about our group, the Alternative Banking Working Group of Occupy Wall Street.
Right, and who is involved in the group? Like, who is involved in putting together this book?
All right. Well, to tell you about that, I've been going since last year, so almost a year and a half at this point. The group is almost 2 years old to the day, I think in another 10 days. Somebody who's been very involved from the beginning is Kathy O'Neill, who is this really fantastic mathematician. At least that is her reputation. I couldn't say because I'm not a mathematician. But she was working for hedge funds, and she has a typical story for members of the group, by the way. About half the members of the group have a story like this. She was working for a hedge fund with Larry Summers, and at some point she had had enough because she saw that there was no morality in anything they were doing. It was just about churn to make deals, make the maximum money, use data, abuse data to justify whatever they were doing. To always say, well, according to our models, this should work, so therefore we can go ahead and make the most money we can. So she dropped out, and she was interviewed by PBS Frontline last year, which is the link I sent you. I hope you can get that out as well to your viewers, because it's a really fantastic interview, both about the workings of Wall Street and about how one comes to a moral decision at some point to say, enough, I cannot be a part of this. Which is what Kathy did.
Which is what I've said many times in many jobs that I've had.
Well, it's understandable in this thing that we call an economy in this country and on this world. So there are other financial professionals, accountants, economists, former traders. We've had whistleblowers come to us. We've had a lot of people, a lot of activists who are working really deep in detailed work on things like how municipal bonds are used to rip off municipalities, how banks, basically steal the treasuries of small towns, telling them that they're going to give them the best deal with bonds. So there's been a lot of that, and we also have a lot of perfectly regular people, and it's great. Every week, every Sunday, this has been meeting without fail, and it is like a college seminar that's going to bring the beginner into financial literacy. That ultimately is what the book is about also. introducing you, I shouldn't say financial literacy, because it's not so much the personal financial literacy as literacy about the financial sector, which everyone needs to know just how badly we are all being fleeced by it and what to do about it.
Exactly. I feel like such a part of the problem of our society is that no one just helps anyone. I mean, if everyone is just looking to make money off of someone, I mean, of course, you're going to be looking to get over. I mean, it's pretty, sad. And an inhumane society we're creating. Like if all we're gonna do is look at one another with dollar signs in our eyes, and your fangs are hanging out, and you're like salivating to get your teeth into someone. I mean, it's pretty sad.
Catherine, I think that's a really important and good point. And I think one of the biggest problems is that we have an ideology in this system that justifies that says this is the best way to do it. This is how we get prosperity for the most people, the greatest good for the greatest number. If only we all pursue our own self-interest as ruthlessly and as selfishly as possible, we will get the best results. And that's just a lie. That ends up justifying sociopathy. And that ends up justifying this whole bottom line, shareholder value, profit-oriented thinking that says anything you do is all right. And that's why you get things like HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation, which is actually in London. That's how you get them laundering billions of dollars for drug lords, because it's all right. It's justified.
Right. Can I just make this one quick point? Because I've been like a health and fitness person all my life. And so I always go back to nature. And the reason why like our society is so screwed up is because money has taken us completely off course from the way that natural law works. And so what you just described, I mean, I think of when I go food shopping and I buy a couple of lemons or tomatoes, and if I put them in my refrigerator and don't use them and I kind of forget that they're there, which happens from time to time, they will turn into black, moldy, rotten, wrinkly looking, it won't even look like a tomato after a while. And so that's pretty much the way that I look at the system. These people want to stay ripe forever. And all of these default, freaking debt swap things, and they're all like preservatives designed to keep them ripe forever. And while the rest of us are rotting, that's kind of the way I've come to look at it.
Well, the way I look at a lot of these financial products is they're basically designed to extract the maximum value out of human beings. Human beings are turned into financial products. That's a big part of what the book is about, starting in chapter 1.
Right.
How, if you want to talk about that, how originally, say, 50 years ago, not to romanticize anything about 50 years ago, but not right now, we're talking about the financial sector. 50 years ago, a family would typically, if they were lucky, if they were middle class, they would have a mortgage and maybe a car loan. And the mortgage would be with one bank, and it would be with that bank forever. And that bank would make a good loan because it would depend on people actually paying back the loan. And what happened, this transformation because of deregulation in the 90s, you had this deregulation in the 90s because of the whole market ideology that we've been talking about that says whatever you can get away with is good. And as a result, that mortgage turned into a product that the local bank or the local lender is now selling to a bigger bank. And the bigger bank packages it into a security. And therefore, they have no incentive, and they sell the security to somebody else, to an investor. And therefore, there's no incentive to care about what kind of loans they're making. They need to make as many loans as possible just to grow because it becomes very competitive. So that's how you got this whole mortgage-backed securities scam that ended up blowing up the world economy. That's what we're still dealing with 5 years later, since 2008. But they're trying as much as possible to blame that instead on the people, to say they shouldn't have borrowed. Well, those loans shouldn't have been offered to a lot of those people in the first place. That's the problem.
Look, the whole point is that the people are coming to them for their knowledge and their assistance. If the people knew this stuff, they wouldn't need the bank. So essentially, then the bank is pretty much admitting, that they're criminals and you shouldn't have trusted us because we're not really here to help you. So therefore, it's your fault that you got screwed.
Goldman Sachs people have said as much. They've said, our job is not to give the best possible advice. It's to sell products. And if we sell products and make a profit, our obligation is to the shareholders and not to the patsies who walk in the door. I think you're highlighting, again, something very important. Another example is the ratings agencies. The ratings agencies, all this junk that the banks were packaging, they would give it the best possible rating.
They don't admit that, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, they hide. I mean, I'm sure, obviously, people are not going to do business with these banks if they know these things. So it's, why is it then that it's after the people get screwed that they find this stuff out? I mean, when the people come in and you sit down at the desk and the guy's behind the desk and he's got the paperwork and people have to sign the paperwork or, to do business with Wells Fargo, I'm sure the guy behind the desk the guy working for Wells Fargo is not telling the client, well, gee, we're here to screw you over and put you into a debt that you're never going to get out of. It's only after they screw the person is that become blatantly, evident.
Right, but you'd be surprised at how much of this actually is done in the open, because after all, who's listening? Who's reading the financial press? Who's getting these internal emails? Those we see some of them afterwards. And they speak very frankly about the fact that what matters to them is make the deal, get the percentage, sell the product, get rid of it, get it off our books, and give it to some investor patsy. And that's how this spread all around the world, because they were selling these junk bonds to all these places, all these countries, municipalities, companies, banks around the world, as if these were great products, because they...
So that's what I'm saying. So they are lying. I was just going to say a really bad word.
Absolutely, but it's also out in the open.
I mean,
can we say bad words, by the way?
Okay, I'm going to say lying MFs.
Okay.
It's as if they're deliberately trying to spread around financial aids. So, again, just using the metaphor of like somebody who's going on a date. I mean, these people are not looking for a relationship. They just they're looking to just have sex, use you, have some wild, sick orgy for, I mean, it's to the extreme of just using people.
I think really what matters to these people is personal bottom line. That's what it's all about. They can watch the city burn, they can watch the world burn, they can watch their own company burn. And if they come away richer for it and unpunished, that's great. For example, John Fuld of Lehman Brothers, he made $400 million in the last 5 years before his strategy destroyed Lehman Brothers. And they say, oh, the disgraced head of Lehman Brothers. He doesn't care. He made $400 million for destroying Lehman Brothers. He'd destroy Lehman Brothers again. He'd destroy 1,000 Lehman Brothers. It's not a problem. The only way it's a problem to him is if you change the incentives. If you put in a deterrent and you say John Fuld has to go to prison now, that might make a difference.
It just seems to be getting worse and worse, though. I mean, because, let's go back to who's involved in this group. Like, who's been involved? I mean, I used to go pretty regularly before the weather got nice. I mean, I hate to sort of admit it, but...
Hey, you gotta get out there and enjoy the beautiful weather. But now it's fall, so it's time to get back into the alternative banking meetings.
And Michael Hudson, I know, was or sometimes a part of the group.
He has been, yes, and I've met him a few times. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he was there one of the times that I went. Was he a part of putting this book together?
No, not this book. This book arose through the people who came most regularly to the weekly meetings, which again are every Sunday without fail at 3 o'clock. As a matter of fact, there's usually a pre-meeting at 2 o'clock. So you should look at our site on altbanking.net, 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 and you can get on the mailing list and hear about the meetings, which are open to everybody. They happen at Columbia University. You'll get exact directions, and usually from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, but also often with a pre-meeting. In the pre-meeting, some expert will speak on one given subject at length and introduce you to it. During the regular meeting, we might end up talking about everything. We decide at the beginning of the meeting. It doesn't take too long to decide, by the way. This is not a very occupy-heavy meeting with a lot of twinkle fingers and such. In fact, for example, last week we were talking about Robert Reich's new movie about inequality in America and really what was wrong with it. The week of action for raising the minimum wage. J.P. Morgan, all the discussed in the wake of the whale deal and how they all got off at the executive level. The Detroit pensions crisis. So that's an example. And you learn about all these things. I mean, these things, there will always be somebody who really knows how to present it well. We're talking economists and teachers. We're talking really smart people are there. And it's going to be a great conversation no matter what. And then from week to week to week, we come up with ideas for projects to do. For example, we've been doing a series of protests at HSBC because of the money laundering.
I have...
and the book came out of it as well.
I have the interview. I watched that interview, the first interview with Everett Stern when he came out about HSBC. It's apparently old news to a lot of people. I mean, it's pretty sad and depressing when it's public knowledge that HSBC is money laundering and supporting drug cartels. Am I saying it right?
Yes, I think you are saying it right. Can we take a minute to get into the history of it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and no one is doing anything, and
they pretended they did something.
They what?
The authorities pretended that they did something last year. If we could just, if it's all right, to break it down a little bit and go back into the history for a minute.
Sure.
On HSBC. Well, HSBC, first of all, was founded in Hong Kong in 1846, I believe, or 7, after the first Opium War. In the Opium War, Britain went to war against China to force China to consume opium because the Chinese empire was trying to ban opium. Now, I'm not for the war on drugs, but I'm also not for some empire coming into my country and saying what the laws are going to be, because the British were involved in the opium trade. So HSBC was then the bank that they founded in Hong Kong to benefit from the opium trade. So they've been laundering drug money from the beginning. That is why they exist in the first place, because of the Opium War. So if we fast forward to the 2000s, it kept coming out all over the place and all the time in Senate testimonies, in newspaper reports and investigations that they were laundering billions of dollars for the Mexican and the Colombian cartels. After the crisis, finally, they were forced to make an admission by the Justice Department. This was in December 2012. They were forced to sign a settlement by the Justice Department in which they made an admission that they had been laundering drug money and also laundering money for terrorists, but I don't want to get into whatever that story may have been. The main thing here for me is they were laundering money for the Colombian and the Mexican drug cartels. And they had to make this admission, and they had to pay $2 billion. That was the settlement that was imposed on HSBC in December 2012, but with a caveat. they get off. They don't have to admit who was involved. Okay, so you've got master criminals. That is what this is, a criminal organization. You've got master criminals running this bank, HSBC. That's nothing against the people who work for HSBC. This is nothing against the tellers or the middle management or the cleaning lady at HSBC. This is a problem at the executive level of HSBC. You've got major criminals. They are the beneficiaries of the drug war, of the drug money laundering, and they get away with it. That's the thing. And when they get away with it, they have no incentive not to keep doing it. So even after this settlement, which, by the way, $2 billion, it sounds like a lot, but HSBC makes $2 billion in 6 weeks. 6 weeks of 2012 profits are $2 billion for HSBC. So they're just paying an institutional penalty and no personal penalty. So they have no incentive not to do it again. And this Everett, he came to the alternative banking group because he had tried to take his story to the press, to the authorities. Nobody wanted to hear his story. He was working at HSBC as an auditor.
Yeah.
As an auditor, and he says they're still doing it. Of course, they're still doing it. Why shouldn't they do it? Because they already received the reward.
Why shouldn't they do it? I mean,
they'll pay the $2 billion because they make the money personally anyway. It's the personal incentive system that's so much at the center of this. As long as these guys are making these huge bonuses and never get punished for any crime they commit, that says crime pays. Do it. Do it.
Exactly. I mean, and these fines that they get, it's like, give me a break. That's just another deal that they're making.
That's right. It's an institutional fine. You know, if I am the one who made the decision to launder the drug money and I got a bonus from the deals in the end, at the end of the year, you know, I made several $1 million because I did these deals that were actually drug money laundering. And then the government comes and they've discovered us, but they don't punish me. They just say, the bank's got to pay $2 billion. It's a nice little payday for the government, $2 billion, but it's absolutely meaningless to the people who've made these decisions because they're still going back in their helicopters to their very large houses. Okay, and as long as that's the case, as long as they are living high on the hog off these deals, they don't care. They won't care if HSBC some of them won't care if HSBC goes bankrupt tomorrow. They really won't care as long as they come off it with having made tens of millions of dollars. Why should these people at the top care about it? So that incentive system has to change. It has to stop being that like every deal you make, you get a bonus for it.
Okay, so some of the things then that the alternative banking meeting is trying to address would be, I mean, like in what I read from the book, the Volcker rule that pretty much got mangled by, like, this is what I just don't understand. Like, President Obama actually sounded like he did something good by giving the job to, sorry, I forget the guy, his first name, Volcker.
Volcker just came up with the idea for the Volcker rule. Maybe we need to go back to start with Glass-Steagall briefly.
Right.
In the 1930s, after the giant Wall Street crash, biggest Wall Street crash until that time in 1929, and the Great Depression followed, there was a strong banking reform under the New Deal. In 1934, we had something called the Glass-Steagall Act. And the Glass-Steagall Act worked like this. It said, if you are a commercial bank, you cannot you cannot engage in speculative investments on Wall Street with the money of your depositors. Okay, it put up a firewall. It said commercial banks are one thing, insurance companies are another thing, and investment banks like Goldman Sachs are a third thing. And these three units must be completely separate from each other. A company cannot engage in all three at once.
Well, that makes kind of like some sense, I would say.
So after that, you kept having banking crises because, the banking class is still composed, still has a lot of dishonest people in it, and also because people do stupid things. Okay, they bet like crazy. But they don't have the same fallout because it hasn't happened that an institution that has deposits, a depositor institution or a commercial bank like Citibank, it doesn't happen that they get burned by some crazy, complicated Wall Street deal that bankrupts them and then forces the government to bail them out. But then in the 90s, Citibank and Robert Reich and Larry Summers, who were in the government at Treasury, they led the charge. Robert Reich had been working for Goldman Sachs, and he would end up working for Citibank. They led the charge to deregulate, to end the Glass-Steagall limits. They said, we are in a modern period, and these kind of things don't happen anymore. They had all kinds of obtuse, ridiculous justifications. They had their $10 words and $1 million analyses ready to justify getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. So there was a massive banking deregulation, bipartisan. Clinton signed it. The Republicans were the ones who wrote the bill, Graham Leach Bliley. And so this allowed Citibank and J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank, and Bank of America and Wells Fargo to get involved in these speculative investments, to buy insurance companies, to play with credit default swaps and all the other exotic derivatives and deals that would end up crashing the economy by 2008.
So right. I mean, in reality, these things are nothing but bombs, like financial explosives that are designed to explode.
In many cases, that's what they were doing. Towards the end of the housing boom that started with this deregulation, and when we say a housing boom, that sounds like something good, but what's really happening is they are inflating the prices of houses beyond belief, so that every year, for a couple of years, you had 20-30% growth in housing prices. And people were being suckered into taking loans on these inflated values anyway. They would take out loans on extremely expensive houses, and they'd be told, and they wouldn't even be able to pay. They might be unemployed in some cases, but they'd be told, it's okay. If this goes sour, next year you can sell it for 30% on top. So go ahead. Flip this house. You remember Flip This House?
And not even have a job?
Right. In some cases, they had these so-called ninja loans, no income, no assets, and the thing is, a lot of people want to blame the people who took the loans. But the fact is, if in 1999 I was employed and had no assets and tried to get a loan for a $400,000 house, nobody would give it to me. But then in 2005 and 2006, they would give it to me because they were trying to give it to everybody. They didn't care. They didn't care that I would default. They didn't care that thousands of other people would default.
Well, that's what I mean.
They were going to sell these. They were going to sell these to suckers in the end.
Right. So they are taking advantage then of people's like vulnerable positions, act like, they're coming in to help when all they're really doing is, screwing people.
Absolutely. They're taking advantage of vulnerable people, but they're also taking advantage of investors in some cases. The investors sometimes are very rich institutions, but they're being suckered anyway because they trust in Goldman Sachs and they trust in the credit ratings agencies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's, who have given ratings of AAA, meaning this is a solid investment, you can buy it. So at the end of this development, they knew what was going to happen, they being Citibank and the main Wall Street banks, the main ones behind this whole mortgage-backed securities scam. They knew what was going to happen. They knew it was going to go under. And the incredible thing they started doing is they started betting against their own products. They would sell a product, they would recommend a product to an investor. Let's say it's a Norwegian town. A town in Norway wants a solid AAA investment, a pension fund. Most pension funds are only allowed to buy AAA investments. That's why the AAA is so important. And they think the AAA is good enough. I don't have to check this. Moody's checked it for me, and they said it's a AAA investment. So they would go, they would buy this investment, and meanwhile, the bank that sold it to them would be betting against it. They would intentionally put together products to fail, and then they would bet against these same products. And so you had, and in all these cases, you had the same thing as with HSBC, but even worse. When they were caught, like Citibank was caught, Goldman Sachs was caught, there was another outfit called Magnetar that was caught. In each of these cases, when they catch them doing this incredible crime, I mean, really, it's like, you know, it's like I sell you a horse at the races, you know, and I know the horse is about to die, you know, and then I bet against your horse.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's
and I've told you it's a thoroughbred. I've told you it's the greatest horse ever. So when you know, when they get caught doing this by the government always makes a deal with them. But the deal is not like, you know, the deal really should be you testify against the rest of these guys. They go to prison for 20 years. You go to prison for 2 years. That's the kind of deal I want to see in these cases, because then it'll stop happening. But instead, the deal is your bank, your institution will pay damages. You don't have to admit any personal guilt.
Right, I know. So that's what I'm saying. So there is no punishment. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like monetary punishment is not punishment. I mean, they're not even going to feel that.
Not if it's not coming out of their pockets. Not if it's not coming out of their pockets. And I want to contrast this. HSBC, drug money launderers. Meanwhile, in this country, we have this sick war on drugs where it's possible if they hear there's you know, $10,000 worth of marijuana in a housing project with poor people living in the housing project, they'll raid the housing project. They'll send SWAT teams in. They will throw everyone out. They'll evict people out of the housing project for having lived in an apartment where they found marijuana. Okay, you know, and they won't have a second. They'll put people in prison for many, many years. You know,
yeah, that's what really worries me a lot is how, you know, like to divert the attention away from all of this blatant corruption. Like the little guy can't do, you know, I'm right. They can't do anything. I was going to say they can't do anything wrong, but because the people, they're not even doing anything wrong. It's, I mean, right. The people get criminalized over the slightest thing that isn't even like criminal, is just, you know, whatever, like normal human living is being criminalized on the part of the little guy, while these people are just out of control, like psycho mafia cartel. I mean, I don't like how much longer are the police going to go along with stuff like this?
Well, that's a good question, but unfortunately, since Occupy, it has come out. We've learned that in New York, for example, they're probably listening right now. There is there's like a special Lower Manhattan surveillance center where the police, the FBI, and other federal agencies, possibly the CIA as well, share a common office in a large surveillance center together with the Federal Reserve Bank, with Citibank, with Goldman Sachs,
of
with
course.
Pfizer.
I mean,
all your big corporations are there, and especially your banks, you know, and it's a crisis center for them to deal with it. You know, and HSBC is no doubt there as well. It will have its representative there. And HSBC is actually engaged in laundering drug money. And meanwhile, you know, somebody who's selling marijuana on the street, you know, if they're unlucky enough, and it happens to thousands of people every year, ends up in prison for who knows how long. It's sick. It's sick.
Yeah, it's I mean,
and we've got to raise awareness about this. I mean, that's the first step. That's why people said it's time to occupy Wall Street. You can't just go and wave some flags in front of a place for a few minutes and you know, hope you get good press. You know, that's why there was this idea 2 years ago. Occupy. You've got to be there permanently. It's got to be like the beginning of a civil, peaceful, nonviolent uprising.
So when I put out the idea on, you know, the last meeting on Sunday, you know, for people to not pay their taxes, because I think desperate times calls for desperate measures. I mean, we really have to unplug, because it's the people. I mean, right, like what makes these banks so rich? I mean, whose money are they using? So, I mean, why would people deal with them? I mean, if they're such blatant crooks, like, I just don't get it. And so, withdraw your money. Take your money out of these banks. Stop paying your taxes. I didn't think that was such a
definitely.
radical. It didn't get, it's like it did. I didn't. That idea didn't get too well received. But
Well, I'm not too happy about hearing the taxes part either, Catherine. But I definitely say take your money out of the big mega banks. Okay, that is an excellent start. Don't think that that's the only thing, because if all the little people, as you say, took their money out of the big mega banks, it's only one part of it. It's not a drop in the bucket. It's a good piece of the bucket, but it's only one part of it. We got to put that money into credit unions and into alternatives. That's absolutely the case. But we can't pretend that that's going to be enough. This needs a movement. This needs people in the street disrupting business as usual. Non-violently, peacefully, but persistently. Do not go away. And people make fun of this. They say, what are these hippies doing? It's not even hippies, of course. Occupy Wall Street is full of professionals. Occupy Wall Street has lots of recovering bankers in it.
Exactly. I mean,
from the middle levels, anyway.
Right. Occupy is full of people that are awake.
Last week. Sorry?
I was just saying Occupy is full of the people that are just awake. The people who see it on all levels, not just the ones who hang out at Zuccotti Park. I mean, of course, it's easy to just focus on those people and then use it to portray Occupy as just, homeless people or something, which is clear.
I don't know. I don't know that that's true. I have great friends at Zuccotti Park. And, I think it's very easy to take anybody. They could take me. They could take you. The media, if they wanted to do a hatchet job, if they were like Murdoch Media, and they wanted to make us look like, sick, crazy, insane people, they would do that. They would do that. That's they're part of the problem. That's why we need our media, too. We need to be doing stuff like this radio show that you're doing.
Yeah. I'm happy to. I'm happy to do it. I hate money. I don't like money. I don't.
Send me some of yours, maybe.
I just because we're pretty much running out of time. Before you got on, I had Gerald Celente on for about 20 minutes, and we're just putting everything in basic terminology. I memean, it's all about standing up to the bullies. I mean, you have to, the people have to start standing up to the bullies, or else, I mean, that's it. They're going to get more and more leverage, take away more and more of your rights, not just make the people pay with your money, but make you pay even more with your dignity, your self-respect, and every other thing they're going to get you to give up, to keep.
Absolutely, Catherine. We all got to join some group. One possibility is Alternative Banking Working Group. Go to altbanking.net and find out more. Get in touch and come to our meetings on Sundays.
And it's right. It's the NYC, New York City, NYC GA for General Assembly .net, nycga.net to find the alternative banking meeting. And you guys meet every Sunday from 3 to 5 at Columbia University.
Actually, the right place to go is altbanking.net.
Okay.
altbanking.net. nycga.net, alternative banking. There you will find a blog that has been running for a couple of years, and also quite a few entries by myself, if I say so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nicholas.
Thank you, Catherine. It's been great talking to you. Let's get out there and, get that Occupy Finance book into more people's hands. We give them away for free, by the way.
Right. Okay. Enjoy your night. We'll have you back on again.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Great.
Good night.
Good night.
Tuesday. Stand up for yourself. Support the vulnerable. Thank you for listening. Cat Waters. Good night.